Howdy folks, hope you're all having a good one, and welcome back to World of Warships with Rear Admiral Jingles. Today we have a familiar face, although perhaps not a familiar name. This is the artist formerly known as Flambas. Quite some time back he used to have his audience pick a new name for him as a sort of random battle anonymizer, but he's been sticking with Sinks Boats for Food here for quite a while. Also, big congratulations are due. Flambas's wife just had their first baby, so congratulations to both of them for that. So, what's the deal with today's battle? Well, I'm sure you're aware that I'm constantly going on at you that you need to be playing the objectives in this game, whether that's taking the cap circles in a domination battle like this, or chasing the buffs and pushing the central cap if you play an arms race. And all of that's true. I'm not saying that's wrong. But I'm kind of reminded of the famous Louis C.K. comedy sketch. Of course, but maybe. For those of you who haven't heard it, it kind of goes like this. In my head I have two things. There's the good thing, there's this thing, the thing that I believe, and then there's this other thing. And I'm not saying I believe it, but it is there. It's become a category in my brain that I call, of course, but maybe. Let me give you an example. Of course, children who have nut allergies need to be protected. Of course they do. Of course. We need to segregate their food from nuts. We need to ensure that their medication is available at all times. And if you're responsible for preparing food, you need to ensure that you take every possible precaution to ensure that no cross-contamination with nuts occurs during the food preparation process. Of course, of course, of course. But maybe, if touching a nut kills you, maybe you're supposed to die. And it's kind of like that with... I'm sorry. No, I'm not. And it's kind of like that with my advice to always play the objective. Of course you should always play the objective. Of course. Of course you should. But maybe sometimes it's just simpler to wipe out the entire enemy team. Flambas's team are going to be playing the objectives. In fact, for most of this battle, the enemy team are not going to control a single cap circle. Let's see how well that works out. The ship that Flambas is sailing today is the pan-European Tier 9 destroyer, the Friesland. If you're thinking this looks remarkably similar to the Tier 9 Dutch destroyer, the Groningen, congratulations, they are exactly the same ship. The Friesland was introduced as a pan-European destroyer before the Dutch tech tree was a thing. And when the Dutch tech tree was introduced, rather than coming up with a brand new Tier 9 destroyer, they just cloned the Friesland and called it the Groningen. Although the good news was that if you had the Friesland, then you basically got the Groningen for free. So, yeah, that was nice. And I like this ship. Ooh, enemy carriers on the ball. Managed to nose into those torpedoes before they had time to arm. Oh, and the team have already suffered their first casualty. The Scharnhorst 43 has gone down. But yes, I do like the Friesland. There's a lot to like about it. It's one of those ships that doesn't have an awful lot of guns, but the guns that it have definitely punch above their weight. The rate of fire on those 4 120mm guns is crazy good. It also has a very, very good hydro. In fact, a hydro that's unique to the Friesland and the Groningen. It will last for 100 seconds. It will detect a torpedo at 3.5 kilometers, a ship at 5 kilometers. It only has a 120-second cooldown. The ship also has an excellent, almost American smoke generator that lays a huge smoke screen that lasts forever. There are a lot of very, very good things about this ship. There's two things about it that are, well, there's only one thing about it that I'd say is downright bad. And one thing that's mediocre, and that's the mobility. The speed isn't great, and it doesn't get an engine boost. But the really bad thing about the Friesland, and its clone the Groningen, is that it doesn't get torpedoes. At all. In any way, shape or form. And that is the ship's biggest problem. Because I don't know about you, but if I see an enemy destroyer, and I know the enemy destroyer has seen me, and then that thing smokes up, and I don't have radar or hydro available, I'm not going anywhere near that smoke screen until I see the torpedoes and know that it's reasonably safe to charge the smoke screen. And until I see those torpedoes, I'm going to stop taking evasive action. I'm going to hide behind an island. I'm not going anywhere near that smoke screen. But if I see a Friesland smoking up, and obviously this also applies to a Groningen because it's exactly the same ship. If I see one of those smoking up, and there are no other enemy ships nearby, why not charge the smoke screen, regardless of whether you're in a destroyer, a cruiser, or a battleship? Because what's the Friesland going to do? It poses literally zero deterrence factor, particularly to enemy battleships. You simply cannot lock down and defend a flank on your own if you need to in a Friesland in the way that you can in a Halland or a La Pampa or a Benham or pretty much any other pan-European destroyer with rapid reloading and faster torpedoes. Because why not rush a Friesland that's smoked up? What's the worst that's going to happen? There have been many occasions when I've been in my Friesland, and I do like my Friesland, but there have been occasions when I've smoked up, and remember, extra long duration smoke screen, and I've gotten basically no use out of it because the enemy cruisers have just rushed the smoke because they know I'm a Friesland, and what's the worst that's going to happen? So, yeah, great ship, but with one big weakness. Note that the enemy team are not playing the objectives, by the way. They don't have a single cap circle. Of course you should play the objectives. Of course you should. Of course. But maybe just killing the whole enemy team achieves the same objective, and it's faster. Flambas waiting for his hydro and his smoke to come off cooldown there so he could shelter up behind this island. And there are another 2 enemy destroyers out there, and he's calling for radar. And to his credit, the Missouri, who's being farmed by those 2 enemy destroyers and is about to die, realises that, well, he's kind of buggered here, but he does have radar, and it is available, and, well, he's about to provide it. There it goes. So good job, Missouri. Oh, speaking of radar, I mean, the Missouri's doomed, but Flambas asked for radar, he had it, he was in a position to use it, he provided it. But yes, speaking of radar, the Matchmaker, you all know it, you all love it, the World of Warships Matchmaker is up to its old tricks again. The enemy team have 1 radar, and it's their Atlanta, and it's no bother to Flambas all the way down here because the Atlanta is all the way up to the northwest in Cap Circle Alpha, and it's a shitty tier 7 radar, so it's not really any threat to anybody. Flambas's team, on the other hand, definitely have 3 radar, potentially 4 if their Edinburgh has gone with radar instead of smoke, but let's be realistic here, it's probably gone with smoke. But still, at the very least, it's 3 times as many radars as the enemy team have. So there's definitely 4 radar ships in this battle, possibly 5, but we know that there's 4. And the Matchmakers put 3 of them on one team, 1 on the other team. 4 radars, 2 teams. I can see a way of spreading those radars around evenly so that you don't give one team an unfair advantage. But then again, unlike the World of Warships Matchmaker, I am capable of dividing by 2. Apparently, mathematics is hard. Speaking of mathematics, the enemy team appear to have subtracted 7 ships from Flambas's team for the loss of only 1 of their own. And they still don't have a single cap circle. So, you know, of course you should play the objectives. Of course. But maybe... maybe it's just simpler to kill everybody. This is generally the point where I say things are going to get a lot worse before they start getting any better. And that's half true. Things are going to get a lot worse, but they ain't going to get any better. Oh, and the major issue that I was talking about with the Friesland, the fact that it basically poses no deterrence to anything because it doesn't have torpedoes, you're going to see the perfect example of that as well. In the meantime, Flambas still thinks he might be able to win this. And, I mean, to be fair, he might. He actually might. I mean, it doesn't happen often, but I have seen teams come back. Oh no, they've just lost another Indianapolis. There's now only 4 of them left. Okay. I don't think I have actually seen teams come back from a position as desperate as this. Note that Flambass is asking for spotting of the enemy destroyer, and the friendly carrier, the Saipan, is like, yep, I've got you. He sends his aircraft over, but, yeah, speaking of aircraft, well, there goes the Air Defence Expert Award, spotted by the enemy Lexington. And in what is normally a brown alert moment for a destroyer, getting spotted in open water with a San Diego looking at you, turns into a bit of a brown alert moment for the San Diego. It's not often you see a destroyer chasing the San Diego into hiding, but, well, yeah, that just happened. Of course, it wasn't just Flambass that the San Diego was ducking into cover from. It was also getting shot at by a friendly Indianapolis heavy cruiser. What Indianapolis? Oh, the one that just died. Which means there's now only 3 of them left. On the bright side, at least the Indianapolis did take the San Diego down with him. And the carrier did momentarily spot that destroyer. Unfortunately, it was momentarily. It immediately smoked up upon detection, but the air spotting provided by the carrier is at least giving Flambass the opportunity to pop his own smoke and still see some targets. Oh. The friendly Nagato just died. They're now outnumbered more than 4-1. The friendly Saipan is doing his best, but Flambass is forced to peek out of the smoke and acquire targets for himself, and is instantly air spotted by the enemy carrier because, of course, he has his aircraft hovering over the smoke screen. And the Lexington can do that in a way that the Saipan can't, because the Saipan is basically just not a very good carrier at all. One of its many downsides is that it has a very long plane restoration time. So towards the end of a battle, which I'm pretty sure is what's happening to that Saipan now, it can actually be in a situation where it just doesn't have any aircraft to launch. Which means Flambass is having to peek out of this smoke screen in order to spot things for himself. And here's the situation I was talking about earlier, the perfect example of why the Friesland, good destroyer though it is no deterrent to anything. The entire enemy team are all rushing his smoke. 5 of them are battleships. When was the last time you saw one battleship, let alone 5, that was brave enough to rush a destroyer's smokescreen? Can you see this happening with a Benham or a Shimakaze? No, I don't think so. But why not rush a Friesland smokescreen? What's it going to do? And again, this is the problem. He's still got a minute left on that smoke. But it's useless to him. And of course, the other problem is that he only has a top speed of 36 knots and no engine boost. And when you're manoeuvring like this because you're spotted, you're not doing 36 knots. In fact, he's struggling to do 32. And that means the enemy cruisers, and possibly also some of the battleships, can actually catch up with him. Now, the good news, if there can be said to be any good news about this situation, honestly, I am kind of reaching for straws here, is that the smoke does have a cooldown that's not much longer than the duration. And he's buying not just himself some time and space here, he's also buying the Saipan a chance to actually replenish some of its squadrons and provide some spotting for when his smoke once again becomes available, and he's got some distance between himself and his pursuers. Saipan dive bomber squadron over there getting wasted. See, it's not just that they have very slow plane restoration times on the Saipan. The squadrons are small, as are the deck reserves. So hopefully, because there go the dive bombers, right as Flambass's smoke comes off cooldown, hopefully he's got some torpedo bombers ready to go, because Flambass is going to require some spotting here. There goes the smoke. And there goes the 120mm high explosive, which means the Brandenburg over there is about to have a very bad day. Of course, none of this would be possible if the Saipan didn't have some aircraft overhead, rocket attack planes, I think. And this is the sort of thing that the Friesland is very good at. I mean, it only has 4 guns. They're only 4-inch guns. They're not even 5-inch guns. They're only 120mm. But with destroyers, it's often the case that it's not the number of guns that's important, although having a lot of guns doesn't hurt. It's the accuracy, the volume and rate of fire. And in that respect, the Friesland certainly ticks all of the boxes. In fact, if you look at something like the Forrest Sherman, it only has 3 guns, but I think it actually has higher damage per minute than the Friesland. And that Brandenburg is certainly not having a good day. Okay, I take it back. What I said about the Friesland not being any kind of deterrent. I think it depends on who's sailing the Friesland, but that is one well and truly deterred Brandenburg, and it wasn't any torpedoes that scared him off. Is he gonna? He's gonna die surely. Yeah, there it is. Flambass's first kill, and he got that kill just in time to be the last one left alive on his team as the Saipan goes down, and he is outnumbered 8-1. There's a Fiji closing in, but the smoke's still up. Can he get him? He got the Fiji, but the Fiji's almost certainly launched torpedoes. His hydro is running, though. If the Fiji had managed to get any torpedoes away, he would have seen them by now, so I think his torpedo's safe. He can stay inside the smoke screen. And the only reason he can actually see these targets to shoot at is because before the Saipan sank, it managed to get a squadron of torpedo bombers away. So good job, that Saipan player. Providing aerial spotting. There they go. Exactly when Flambass needed it the most. I'm not sure it's going to be enough, though. Because the torpedo bombers have now been shot down. The Lexington overhead with its own dive bombers just as Flambass's smokescreen is about to expire. Yeah, it kind of is. Oh, he's going to be chased out. Possibly, maybe, he can ram and take the Adatara with him. Or then again, maybe not. Yeah, I'm going to go with not. Damn, son. So like I said, of course you should play the objectives. Of course. But maybe it's simpler and a whole lot more satisfying to just sink everybody. 1,600 base experience on a defeat. Twice as much base XP as the next best player on his team. You know what? I just thought of another, of course, but maybe. Of course Flambass's team sucked. Of course they did. Of course. But maybe the enemy team was just better. Because we're all guilty of it. You get a result like this and you just want to curse your team for being losers. But maybe they weren't that bad. It's just the enemy team, despite not having your team's advantages, like having Flambass on their team, or having 4 times as many radars as the enemy team, or having almost complete map control for most of the battle. They had none of that, but they won fairly convincingly anyway. Maybe they're just the better team, or maybe it's a little bit of both. Maybe Flambass's team did kind of suck, and the enemy team were just that good. Yeah, I'm going to go with a little bit of both. Well, anyway, just to prove that not every battle that Flambass sets in is a ruffle stomp from start to finish. Well, technically this was a ruffle stomp from start to finish. It's just that he didn't have the benefit of being on the winning team this time around. I do hope you enjoyed it regardless, and I hope it gave you something to have a laugh and a chuckle about. And let me know what you thought in the comments, because that is it for today. As always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.